Everyone. This is MSY's Research Notes. Yesterday, we have introduced the empirical studies of the essay that we introduced several days consecutively. And yesterday, we concluded with the confirmatory factor analysis, CFA. So confirmatory factor analysis is the tests of the psychrometrics, or what is psychrometrics is like the scientific study of designing and validating the questionnaire or the scales. So psychrometric is a kind of scientific studies. And today, I only have 15 minutes because it's very, very late, and I'm now still studying in the teaching building, so I only have 15 minutes. And tomorrow is weekend. Oh, by the way, today is Thursday. I'm also writing my essays. So tomorrow I have already booked an empty room, which means that I can have a relatively longer time to record my academic findings or my personal thinkings. So probably tomorrow I will share with you something more. But today, let's begin with the second part of the empirical studies, which is the association between foreign language enjoyment and demographic variables. So we can notice here the demographic variables is, for example, something like your age, your gender, also let me see, your academic major, linguistic proficiency, nationalities, and learning context. So like what I've said, there are mainly 6 different types of demographic variables that have been thoroughly studied in the existing studies. Most of them, I can say, 5 of them have already reached like a kind of consistent result, with the exception of gender. Some studies have concluded that gender is something that can have an impact on students' FLE, whereas other studies they think that gender doesn't have a kind of effect on FLE. So this kind of finding is still inconsistent. But for age, academic major, linguistic proficiency, nationalities, and learning context, both of them has reached a consistent finding. University students generally would generally have higher level of foreign language enjoyment than high school students or younger students. But sometimes I have to say this is not always the case, because for example, some high school students, when they are approaching to the college entrance examination, especially when they are under tremendous pressure, they generally would have lower scores of foreign language enjoyment. And this kind of finding has already this kind of finding was published in Professor Li Chengchen's articles, and also in her articles, in her studies, some younger students, especially some rural students, some junior high school students in China, they reported a significantly higher level of foreign language enjoyment. So from this single author, we can see that this is not always the case, that when the older you are, the higher level of foreign language enjoyment you will have. So even though researchers now unanimously say that age has already, let's say, has already shown the consistent findings. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that the older you are, the higher level of foreign language enjoyment you will have. But the effect of age is consistent, it means that it can have an impact on foreign language enjoyment. Well, I think I agree with that. And the second is about gender, which I have already introduced. And the third is academic major. Not only about language majors, but like the students with higher academic achievements will report higher level of foreign language enjoyment than those who performed relatively poor in their studies. And linguistic proficiency is absolutely obvious because higher proficiency means higher FLE. This is very easy to understand because if you don't like FLE or if you don't like this kind of language, you can't get a high level of foreign language enjoyment. Then how are you supposed to have a mastery of those words? Is nearly impossible if you don't like to do that. And the fifth is nationalities. Well, multilingual context, absolutely, students from that kind of context would generally have higher level of foreign language enjoyment because in their childhood or at the time when they living and studying in a kind of multilingual context, they generally would embrace or accept different types of languages. And I think at least most of them can say something about another language or other languages, which is quite different from the situation here in China because we generally only have one mother language, which is Chinese. So English is absolutely a second language or a foreign language. We are not a kind of multi-language, multilingual nation. Even though we have dialects, we have Cantonese, but I'm now living in the northern part of China, so I don't know how to speak Cantonese. I don't even know how to speak a dialect because Mandarin is my mother language, and so sometimes I really say envy or I really want to live in a kind of multilingual context for language learning because I know it's very helpful. And the last one is the learning context. Well, learning context doesn't equal to multilingual context, but learning context means formal or informal. For example, formal plus informal would yield a higher level of foreign language enjoyment. But this part I'm not quite familiar with that, so probably something that I have introduced is a little bit wrong, but most of them I think are correct, especially the consistent findings. And then we need to move to the next part, 2.3. The third part of the empirical studies, the link between FLE and individual difference variables. So you can see that the second part is demographic variables and the third is individual difference variables. So individual difference variables is something like an academic term, which is frequently used in the academic writing. Individual variables, for example, include like emotions, which is one of the most prominent variables in individual difference variables. And then emotion then absolutely include FLA, FLE, or motivation or whatever. So in this part, in this assay, individual difference variables are divided into two parts, including FLA and others. So, so why the author divided like this? Why she put FLA as a single category here? Is because FLA has a much longer history compared with FLE or other emotions, because generally speaking, in the history, psychologists they started from like the clinical tests, and they mainly focused on the negative sides of the patients or their clinics, their clients. So so only let's say in recent decades, when the positive emotions was brought into the psychological studies. So basically, in history, no one did research about the positive emotions or the positive psychologies. So this is why the author, I think, put FLA as a single category compared with other emotions or other individual variables. So let's see what the author then said. So the author then quoted the Wells studies and other less well-known research to draw a conclusion that foreign language enjoyment and foreign language anxiety are negatively related. Well, as you can see, this part, I think the author didn't really do a good job because I think her writing is very, very confusing, and many things she didn't explain it very clearly. So I think probably now I can say I've already finished reading this essay, even though something I haven't introduced. But I have to say that this part is very, very confusing because the author didn't really explain that. So we'll jump this part. And so to the next part is the relationship between foreign language enjoyment and foreign language anxiety. The relationship is obvious, and quantitative studies have demonstrated a strong or moderate negative correlation between FLE and FLA. The correlation was strong or moderate. Okay, but this kind of correlation isn't linear. These emotions can coexist. All right, these emotions can coexist, and the correlation was strong or moderate. Okay. I think this is easy to understand, and I just need to remember the correlation is negative, and it's strong or moderate, and it's not linear. Those emotions can coexist. You can feel very nervous when you're raising your hand to answer the question, but you raise your hand because you want a challenge. You want to solve the problem and confront the challenges. So that's the proof of feeling foreign language enjoyment. So those emotions can coexist, absolutely. And after introducing FLA, the author then moved to other individual difference variables. She mainly introduced academic achievement and willingness to communicate. Willingness to communicate, also known as WTC, is also a frequently cited parameter to understand how learners have learned a second language. So this is another parameter, just like FLE. So the author didn't really say much about this part. Therefore, even though this is a review article, I still don't think the author has done a thorough research, which is a pity for readers like me. And then we need to move to the next part, 2.4, FLE as a complex and dynamic construct. Complex and dynamic construct, but now we have already reached our time, only 15 minutes. So tomorrow I will introduce the last part of the empirical studies, and after that part, we will finish the empirical studies and move to the last part of the essay, the suggestions for future research, which is a very, very short part. And after this essay, in the past, I thought I would introduce the two phases of Janus, that article, the foundational article written by Professor Dewell and McIntyre. But as I am writing my essay right now, I think my essay is about the dynamic feature of foreign language enjoyment. So I'm also reading some other essays. So I think why not just introduce the essays that I have written, that I have read um, just recently, more recently, I think. So tomorrow I will introduce the dynamic interactions in foreign language classroom anxiety and foreign language enjoyment of pupils aged 12 to 18, a pseudo-longitudinal investigation. This is the article written by Professor Jean-Marc Dewall and and his daughter, Livia Dewall. And Livia Dewall is the students or undergraduate students and postgraduate students in the University of Oxford. So this article is also a very, very important one, and it's also a very groundbreaking one. So tomorrow I will introduce this. And this is the end of today. And see you tomorrow. Good night.